Extension. Rutgers Cooperative Extension is part of the New Jersey Experimental Station. And we have, right now, we're at 21, I believe, of the 21 counties in New Jersey have cooperative extension departments. So we have 3 departments. There's Family and Community Health Sciences, which is the 3 ladies here. And then we have Agriculture and Natural Resources, which is Doug's department. And then we have 4-H Youth Development. So they're the 3 different departments that we have. This is an example from our website, and you can go on here. We have all types of information for the community, and we're a land grant university, so we're charged with teaching to the community. So that's why we're all here tonight. This gives you a little bit of indication about the land grant information. We are in all 21 counties, and our mission is to help the diverse population of New Jersey adapt to rapidly changing society and improve their lives and communities through an educational process that uses science-based knowledge. So everything you'll hear here tonight is steeped in science-based information. We've been doing the What's the Catch program this is our 3rd time, right, together. And we started it kind of by accident. Doug and I were talking one day, and I said, hey, I'm new. It was 2020. Everything was shut down. Let's try to do a program together. So we started What's the Catch, New Jersey Seafood and Healthy Living. We focus completely on New Jersey seafood. So those salmon questions won't be really relevant. But we decided that, you know, there's a lot of information out there, and we wanted to make sure, because people don't eat enough seafood, they don't meet the requirements for seafood consumption, and the combination of aquacultures and fisheries made a really good pairing. So tonight is the first night Doug and I have actually ever met in person, even though we've been working together for 3 years. So it's been a fun adventure, and we hope to get some good information out of this. So now I'm going to turn it over to Doug Zemeckis, and he's going to give his information about fisheries and aquaculture.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out in person and on the webinar. I believe they can hear me all right. So I have about 20-25 minutes to give you a 10,000, maybe even a 30,000 foot view of the magnificent commercial and recreational fisheries and shellfish aquaculture that we have here in New Jersey. As Chris introduced, I'll talk about our industries, seafood production, and then you have to hear the tasty aspects from my colleagues about cooking preparation and the many health and nutrition benefits. So anybody actively involved in recreational fisheries by show of hands? You got one? Okay, only one. Commercial fishing, probably even fewer. All right. Probably nobody than shellfish aquaculture either. All right. So hopefully tonight in 25 minutes, you're going to learn a great deal about the great seafood production we have here in New Jersey. So we are known as the Garden State, but we have over 130 miles of Atlantic coastline. Then you have Delaware Bay, Raritan Bay, and all the other estuaries in between, Barnegat Bay back here, right behind us here in Ocean City. So we have magnificent and bountiful marine resources and habitats that, you know, we also garden and farm and harvest from our ocean as well here in New Jersey. So you probably did not know before this slide popped up, New Jersey is actually number 4 in the country in terms of out of 50 states in the value of our commercial fishing and seafood industry. The NOAA Fisheries Economics of the United States report, they last looked through 2019, the last normal year before COVID. It's about a $3.7 billion industry here in New Jersey, over 52,000 jobs in 2019. Our major commercial fishing ports down here in Cape May County, Cape May Wildwood, excuse my fingers, Atlantic City, Barnegat Light, Point Pleasant up in Ocean County. Wow, different clicker, my apologies. Belford up in Monmouth County. Not shown here, also Port Norris down on Delaware Bay. Our most valuable fisheries here in New Jersey are actually our shellfish fisheries. I'll show a couple examples coming up, but Atlantic sea scallop is our most valuable. That's what helps put us above even Alaska in terms of value. We're ahead of them. The sea scallop fishery is worth a great deal. And then we have surf clam, ocean quahog, and then the offshore for short fin and long fin squid. Became a major fishery in the last several years. In our estuaries, we have the commercial blue crab fishery, primarily in Delaware Bay, but also throughout parts of Barnegat Bay and a little bit down this way as well. Finally got to a finfish, summer flounder, the #1 finfish commercially. Monkfish there, an anglerfish, and we're near the southern extent of the range, but we actually have a bit of a commercial lobster fishery here. So these are the most valuable, but there's a lot of diversity throughout the state as well. Just grabbing 4 different ports here. These are the 5 most valuable for each of those 4 ports, 2015 to 2019. So you take a look up at Belford and Monmouth County, they're primarily almost all the boats up there are bottom trawlers. Squid is one of their, summer flounder is their top by far, but they also catch some menhaden, squid, scup, and black sea bass. You take a port, Barney Light in Ocean County, just like Cape May and Wildwood, they have more scallop vessels there. That's their top in terms of value. There's some longline boats, both on the bottom and mid-water longline boats out of Barney Light. The ones on the bottom are fishing for primarily golden tilefish. Longliners pelagically, they catch yellowfin, big eye tuna, also swordfish. And there's a few gill netters and trawlers, monkfish, summer flounder. They also catch dogfish in the summer. They're catching sharks and different types of mackerel and bonita. Cape May Wildwood, you see some of the top, that's our most valuable commercial fishery here at Port in New Jersey, scallops, squid, and surf clam. And then there's some boats also that go after menhaden or bunker. A port like Port Norris, they are almost exclusively fishing in the estuary in Delaware Bay. Dredges for oysters, traps, and dredges during the winter for blue crabs, different types of nets for menhaden eels, and pot boats going after whelk. So very diverse fisheries, depends on the port, whether they have boats that fish close to shore or further offshore. So as part of the monitoring system, these commercial boats, many people like, well, do they really monitor the commercial fishery? And they do in many different ways to monitor what they catch, what they discard, the amount of effort that they put into harvesting seafood. One way in which is they have VMS, vessel monitoring systems. In the commercial scallop fishery, they have to report their position to the government every 30 minutes from the time that they leave the dock. That's part of enforcement, and it also provides useful data for science and management. So these are just 2 years of data, but you can go back a couple decades now, about 15 years or so since they've been using vessel monitoring systems. The commercial scallop fishery, they're about 50 to 100-foot boats. They fish maybe one or two dredges at a time to harvest scallops. Folks are probably most familiar with adductor mussel when they're on their dinner plate, but this is a large adult sea scallop. Could be the size of your hand, is a good size one. They're all shucked at sea. Each crew member shucks thousands per day. It's incredibly rapid, very laborious work for sure, and they only bring the meats back on board. But what these maps are showing at all speeds and less than 5 knots, all speeds, it shows where those boats are transiting. Less than 5 knots, that's when they're actively fishing their dredges. So you see most of them, they leave out of Cape May, Little Atlantic City, Barney Light, Point Pleasant, and they fish offshore grounds about 50 to 80 miles off the beach, most of the trips approximately. Some of them go all the way up to George's Bank off Cape Cod and could be near the Canadian border. They leave so far from New Jersey. Depends on where they have their trips allocated to harvest the scallops. Scallops don't move, and they have rotational management. So it's been a very sustainable fishery, highly profitable for the Northeast since about the last 20 years or so. The second most valuable commercial fishery is the hydraulic dredge fishery, primarily out of Atlantic City, also out of Cape May or Point Pleasant, and they're catching surf clams and ocean quahogs, one of the longest living animals in the world. They could be a couple hundred years old, ocean quahogs, not to be confused with the quahog, a hard clam you might see in the estuary. These are ocean quahogs found in deeper, colder water. Get an idea, they used to fish closer to shore, but due to warming, climate change and ocean warming, surf clam distribution has shifted much further off the coast and into deeper waters. And the fishermen, they used to catch them close to shore, used to see them washing up on the beach much more frequently. If we have frequent beachgoers here, I imagine so. But the resource has shifted further offshore, and this is where the fishermen more commonly fish in recent years for surf clams and ocean quahogs. The third most valuable fishery in the last decade or so, it's increasingly important, are the bottom trawl fisheries coming out of Cape May, Point Pleasant, and up out of Belford, fishing for squid. And this goes to bait, or it goes to the high quality food market as well. These commercial boats going offshore with bottom trawls, fishing for squid. If you're familiar, you have the Hudson Canyon, the river basin. There's this area of deeper water here out to the mud hole, out towards the Hudson Canyon and the deeper edge. And that's where the squid hang out, particularly during the winter, spring, into the summer. And the commercial fishery from all the Northeast ports have been increasingly catching squid off our waters. So that was all commercial fishing. On the recreational front, separate but also very important industry. People think about recreational fishing primarily for recreation, which is the primary motive, but also people go fishing for crabs, striped bass, bluefish, because they also want to harvest their own seafood. You could think of it as a way of agritourism or pick your own, but in this case, you got to catch your own. So it's important also for recreation and tourism, but also a fair amount of food production comes from our recreational fisheries. In 2016, the most recent year from which full data were available, about a $1.2 billion industry here in New Jersey. We have almost 1 million anglers participating in saltwater. This is not including freshwater, recreational fishing each year here in New Jersey, and about 15,000 jobs. There are different ways by which individuals, anglers go fishing recreationally. You can fish off the surf or a pier or a marina. That's actually about half the trips that are taken in the state. You can have a private boat, your friends, great friends with boats, so you can take you out fishing. There's the for hire boat industry, where there's a party or head boats, they're known as, where you pay per person in your party or per head of people that typically you don't need a reservation, but these days sometimes you do. You show up and you pay per person. Or you can do a charter boat, more personalized experience. You know, groups are usually of up to 6 people for a charter boat. The most commonly captured species are summer flounder, bluefish, sea bass, striped bass, and tautog or blackfish, at least in terms of numbers. But we have very diverse fisheries beyond that. People going hard clam fishing in the estuaries, not shown here, but there's not as good a data for the blue crab fishery. It actually might move to the top in terms of the numbers of people who go for fishing for blue crabs. There aren't great data at the state level. These are federal data, but people recreational fishing for blue crabs. And then we have offshore fisheries for tilefish, tunas, swordfish, sharks. So very diverse fisheries here. We have some of the most diverse fisheries in the world, and that's owed to the oceanography. People are probably familiar with the Gulf Stream that comes up from Florida, comes up along the continental edge about 80, 90 miles out. That brings warm water our way. But then we have the Labrador Current, which comes down from maritime Canada, comes down around the Grand Banks, Georges Bank off Cape Cod, and they intersect and interact off our coast. If you've ever been out fishing in the summer, you might catch a mahi-mahi and a tuna at the surface. The water is warm at the bottom. There could be a cod, a winter flounder, or a red hake. That cold water at the bottom is also where the sea scallops and surf clams are living. Since we have such seasonal differences in our warm and cold water, we have very diverse fisheries as well. It makes New Jersey very unique. And people, as I noted, fishing recreationally, you might be going all the way offshore to the canyons for tunas and swordfish. There's a variety of marinas and piers, launch ramps along the coast, and then a whole suite of other fishing grounds in between. You see the green boxes sprinkled along the coast. Those are artificial reefs. Program DEP manages to put artificial reefs out there, sunken ships, concrete mostly, to create habitat for different finfish and shellfish species. So we have a wide array of recreational fishing opportunities here in New Jersey. I'm going to do a quick dive into some of the science and management behind our fisheries. So as you saw, the most popular for the recreational side was summer flounder. And that's also the most valuable for the commercial fishery. So a lot of effort goes into understanding, assessing, and managing summer flounder. And I'm going to try to boil this down here while I have this complicated graph up here. So stock assessments estimate how many fish are in the ocean. It's a naturally difficult thing to do. We like to joke and say it's like counting trees in a forest, but just think they're underwater and they move. So it's actually very difficult. But there's different, I'll show some of the data that go into it. The science estimates how many fish are in the ocean. And the summer flounder population assessment goes back to 1982 to more recently. The black line in the back, that's a measure of the spawning stock biomass. That's the weight of the adults in the population. Managing to be at this dashed line or at least above this solid line. There was no fisheries management plan in play in the early to mid 80s. It came into play. The population actually responded quite nicely, as you can see. It was fully rebuilt. There's been a bit of a downtick recently, but biomass is higher now than it was pre-management. So arguably, we have a lot of room for improvement in terms of the economic yield from the fishery, the net satisfaction, particularly on the recreational standpoint and commercial. But from a biomass standpoint, there's more summer flounder out there now than when there was before management in the 80s and 90s. What is not often recognized at first is the summer flounder fishery. They just changed the allocations. 55% of the catch goes to commercial and 45% to recreational. So the commercial fishermen have a permit to go harvest a wild natural resource that we all own as citizens of the United States. They harvest it to make it available for food consumption for everybody else. But then the recreational sector goes out to harvest their own for enjoyment and to harvest their own seafood. And for the summer flounder, 45% of the allocation goes to the recreational sector. So that's quite a bit of fish actually being harvested by anglers. What this graph is showing is the landings and the dead discards of fish that are thrown back from catch and release. Commercial landings are in dark blue. Recreational landings, what anglers are bringing home, are in green. As you see, in some of the more recent years, several of them, actually more fish are being landed from North Carolina to Maine by recreational anglers than commercial in terms of summer flounder. So there's only, as an individual, when I go out, I might only catch 0 or 1 or 2 keepers a day if I'm lucky these days. But with 1 million anglers in the state fishing a couple times a year, it adds up quite a bit. An important contribution to also for the management, but also for food production. What this table is showing is the Northeast states from Maine to North Carolina who get an allocation for the summer flounder catch. In New Jersey, as you see, 18, 19, and 20 recreationally estimate to be 43, 46, 57% of all the recreational harvest in the Northeast. So we're a major player in the recreational summer flounder fishery. If all those catches by state added up, taking a year 2019, about 8 million pounds landed. New Jersey had 46%. So about 3.6 million pounds estimated harvested recreationally in 1 year alone. So it's an important industry. About half the anglers are coming from out of state. So it's important for tourism. It's important for the local economy, obviously, of course, through tourism, docks, marinas, piers, bait shops, fuel, but also contributes to seafood production, as that's a fair amount of food also being produced for the society. So I'm going to try to teach you 3 years worth of graduate fishery science in 2 slides, if I wasn't speaking fast enough already. So fishery science 101, a set of stock assessment is estimating how many fish are in the ocean. How do you even try to go about that? And tell your friends in the elevator in a minute. So surveys are done to give you an idea of the abundance. I don't have the maps coming up, but NOAA National Marine Fisheries Service, they do surveys from North Carolina to Canada. NJDEP here in New Jersey, they go from Sandy Hook down to Cape May 5 times a year. And all the Northeast states also have inshore surveys. Those give you an idea of how many fish they catch every year. So if they catch 2 this year on average, 4 next year, you might say the population doubles. If it went from 2 to 1, it dropped by 50%. So surveys are done. We need to understand their biology, how fast they grow, where they reproduce, what they'd like to eat, because we got to try to manage as you can the whole ecosystem, and estimates of the catch. Essentially, if anybody does this these days, but you're balancing your checkbook on an annual basis. You get an estimate of how many fish, get smaller from catching them, commercial or recreational fisheries. They die due to natural deaths, old age, being eaten, disease, fish get diseases too. The population gets larger from animals growing or from recruitment or new babies. So essentially, models try to update that on an annual basis to estimate how many fish are in the ocean with some error. Our fisheries management is designed to use that information to set sustainable catch targets or catch limits. Idealistically, you have data collections like I showed you there, the ABCs, abundance for surveys, biological catch. Those data go into those stock assessment models, statistical models that I mentioned. They give you an idea of how many fish are in the ocean. We have federal and state management policy, tells you what percentage you're allowed to catch sustainably. You want the population, whatever you harvest for consumption, be able to replace itself, hopefully, for the following year. And then fishery management measures are put into place to hopefully meet but not exceed those catch targets for the commercial and recreational fisheries. So 2 slides there, hopefully boil it down, but we have different groups that are involved in managing our fisheries at the state level, NJDEP. At the federal level, there's councils, Mid-Atlantic, which includes North Carolina through New York. The New England Council is Connecticut through Maine, but we have several fisheries here: dogfish, monkfish, sea scallops, surf clams, that are also managed primarily or jointly by the New England Council. The Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commissions manage cooperatively fisheries from Florida all the way up to Maine. And then NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service. Ultimately, these councils make recommendations to the federal government and NOAA, and then they ultimately follow or modify those recommendations. So you often hear in the news about sustainability of seafood and fisheries. And as I commented on earlier, but as global research has shown around fisheries in developed countries that have science that informs management, more often than not, those fisheries are stable or rebuilding. It's generally less developed countries that don't have science to inform their management, where we have more problems in terms of biomass, when the populations remain more frequently depleted or declining. So here in the US, we have pretty data-rich science and management. And at least in terms of biomass, here in the mid-Atlantic, what this is showing is a number of stocks, fish populations that are overfished, which means their biomass is suboptimal, or overfishing is occurring, which means you're harvesting them at an unsustainable rate. In the mid-Atlantic, we only have 2 stocks that meet either or both of those criteria: bluefish and Atlantic mackerel. We're doing pretty well in terms of biomass here in the mid-Atlantic. You look at the list for New England, they're not doing as well up there. They have a long list from hakes and cod and winter flounder, yellowtail flounder, but kind of a local example there of federal fisheries management, arguably being successful in terms of biomass, including here in the mid-Atlantic, but we have a long ways to go. A few anglers raised their hand. We have a lot of challenges meeting the socioeconomics, keeping people employed, getting angler satisfaction, let alone now we've had pandemic disruptions, fuel costs skyrocketing. But from biomass standpoint, there are some positive examples historically. So I have a couple slides on aquaculture now. I'm running long, aren't I? Apologize. Never. So we also have farming of aquatic organisms here, known as aquaculture. Mariculture is marine aquaculture, but aquaculture, as defined by FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, is the farming of aquatic organisms, including fish, mollusks, crustaceans, and plants. So 3 major differences between wild harvest fishing and aquaculture is in aquaculture, they own the land, they own the crop, and they have some husbandry. You're raising, whether it be a shellfish or algae, seaweed. And in many cases throughout the world, so what this figure is showing, this is world fisheries and aquaculture production. Fisheries are in the orange and red. You see a plateau in the amount of harvest that's come out of global fisheries in the last couple decades or so. Some indications, especially with the growing human population, that we might, in many of our fisheries, already be harvesting them at about what we might expect of productivity moving forward. The blue are showing freshwater, dark, lighter blue at the top, marine aquaculture. And currently, there's been exponential growth in aquaculture, farming of aquatic organisms, to help meet food demands, particularly with the continually growing human population. Here in New Jersey, our marine aquaculture is right now exclusively shellfish, hard clams, and oysters. And these were used to be wild capture fisheries, but due to overharvesting, changes in the ecosystem, and diseases, the wild populations have been critically depleted. And now it's switched to some wild harvest, but then farming shellfish to help meet the demands and growing demands. So the last agricultural census from the USDA for aquaculture, you can look at it by state, but for New Jersey, at least, so this is voluntary reporting. So these are known to be underestimates. It's voluntary to report for this census in this case. But in terms of the oyster farms, 18 farms reported about a $4.3 million industry to the farmers. If you multiply that by 5 in that year, in 2018, it's about a $22 million industry at the minimum. So an important and growing industry economically. Many of the farms are down here in South Jersey in rural areas. It provides economic opportunity and stimulation and local seafood production. We also have the hard clam aquaculture industry. In 2018, 21 farms reported $2.3 $3 million value. When you multiply the economic impact to the communities times 5, it's about a $10, $11 million industry as estimated there. I'm just going to go quickly through hard clam aquaculture. I was going to use it as an example. I knew I didn't have time to also speak about oyster aquaculture, but hard clam aquaculture began in the U.S. in 1920s. This species, hard clams, quahog clams, scientific names mercenaria, money clams. They exist from Florida all the way up into southern New England and beyond, and some up perhaps even to the Gulf of Maine. Farming started here in New Jersey in the mid-70s in response to the decline in the wild population. The local baymen observing major declines in hard clams from harvesting. There was some major disease, QPX disease around those time, which really decimate the wild population. So some of the local wild capture fishermen, they went down to Virginia, met with people who already started farming them down there. They learned how to do it. They came back, started spawning clams in coolers in their garage, and then planting them out in the bay and growing them out. So it got its start, pretty rudimentary methods in the mid 1970s. And there's 3 phases to any aquaculture production. First is the hatchery. We have hatcheries primarily in Atlantic County here in New Jersey. They maintain broodstock in their land-based systems. And in the springtime, they artificially induce them to reproduce in captivity. And then they raise the fertilized larvae up into a couple millimeter size. So about 1 to 4 millimeters. And then they sell them to commercial farmers. Just like if you had to plant seed for your garden or on a farm, same type of principles are happening here. There's hatcheries that spawn the shellfish, and then they sell the seed to the farmers who then raise it to market size. So for hard clam aquaculture, usually they'll sell it at about 1 to 4 millimeters, kind of like the size of a little bit larger than a poppy seed or a sesame seed, quite small. So this is probably a couple months old seed at those bottom pictures. After they buy the seed, well, this is an example of a raceway. This is an outdoor raceway, but this is what the hatchery might look like. They'll spawn, they'll get the larvae, and then they'll put them in raceways that pump in bay water that then gets funneled down the raceway. And so then the larval shellfish and the adult shellfish just feed on the naturally occurring phytoplankton algae that's in the water. So you see some very young, small baby shellfish there, hard clams. That's the hatchery phase. The nursery phase, when they get to be several millimeters, they're commonly then put into upweller systems. Dockside, they pump in bay water. Water comes from the bottom, upwells to the top, flows out. You don't have to feed them anything extra. They're off the natural algae and phytoplankton, in this case, the hard clams. Once they reach about, maybe a nickel in size, a quarter in size at the, end of the summer, fall, then, here's an example of volunteers at Reclaim the Bay that we work with in Ocean County. That's 30,000 almost baby clams at the bottom of that mesh screen. So that's what they start off at after a couple weeks of life. And then by the end of the summer, they're about the size of about a nickel. And then you got to plant them on the bottom, and you got to cover them with screens. Cow nose raised, clams, different types of sponge, other shellfish. They love to eat the clams and oysters. So in the case of farming hard clams, you got to cover them with screens, and you got to keep them protected there. It takes about 3 to 4 years to get a hard clam to 1.5 inches, 2 inches, which is what you'll start seeing with the market. So quite a while. In contrast, oysters, which I didn't show, if they put them on cages in the bottom or floating cages now they use more commonly, it could be about 10 to 13 months and they're 2.5 inches and they're ready for the market. So much quicker growing for oysters than they are on the side of hard clams. So that just going to fire through this here a little bit. But so just like a terrestrial farmer, they're obviously very in tune with the local climate, the land, water, and air around their farm. Managing that on their farm is central to them being able to produce crops. It's the same thing with the shellfish farmers in the estuary. They're on the water almost every day, hopefully, keeping an eye on things, and very responsible, including shellfish have many ecosystem services. They are filter feeders, so they remove excess nitrogen and phosphorus nutrients from the water. They help to clean the water through that filter feeding. They provide habitat and reefs, and particularly oysters. They can help reduce erosion when they're used along the coastline They provide habitat for other fish. So they're known as ecosystem engineers due to all these other positives. So from a farming standpoint, just by growing the shellfish, they're also contributing to improving the water quality. If those shellfish reproduce, their eggs and larvae add to the wild population. So in many ways, the shellfish farmers here in New Jersey are not only providing food by way of hard clams and oysters, but through their methods to do so, as one of the greenest animal source proteins there is in the world, shellfish aquaculture, they're also improving the health of our coastal ecosystems. So if you're interested in buying New Jersey shellfish, the New Jersey Aquaculture Association, they have this webpage here with participating farms and businesses who identified themselves to be put on this map funded by New Jersey Sea Grant a few years ago. So you can check that out on newjerseyaquaculture.org. Also, NJDEP, they have New Jersey Seafood Finder, and these are all local businesses throughout New Jersey that sell locally grown hard clams or oysters or wild caught commercial fishery products here in New Jersey. They might have from other states and countries too, but they have confirmed that they have local New Jersey products. So for those in person, we also, in the gift bags at the end of the night, there's a handout in there about this. Also, if you want to get information, bridging the gap to the next presentation on the health and nutrition benefits, but also in terms of sustainability benefits and issues related to a given species, NOAA National Marine Fisheries Service Fish Watch program, fishwatch.gov. You can go in here and type any name from, tuna to cobia, summer flounder, sea bass, oysters, and then they'll get a screen that pops up, which gives you a bunch of information on there. They give you seafood recommendations based upon health and nutrition, as well as the sustainability based upon the status of the stock and the activities of the fisheries that commonly catch them. So black sea bass is an example. The conclusion, it's a wild caught species, smart seafood choice because it's sustainably managed, responsibly harvested under U.S. fishing regulations. You can get an idea of some of the other elements of the fisheries and the species. And down below, to also help bridge the gap, there's even nutrition facts and some recipes on there. So a great one-stop shopping if you're interested in seafood and the sustainability of our fisheries. With that, if we have any time, I'll take some questions, or also my contact information is there. I'm happy to follow up anytime in the future. Yes, sir.
A couple of things. First, 15,000 job creation. Is that a combination of like 15,000?
Yeah, just repeating so the webinar can hear. The 15,000 jobs, recreational fishing. Yeah, that is an estimate from that NOAA report of not only the folks working on the boats, but yes, also committed to the infrastructure on the shore side. So bait and tackle shops inclusive, and bait manufacturing. Yes, I don't know how well they might take into account the whole the tourism and hospitality of hotel aspect and everything. I would have to dig deeper to better handle that.
And they're helping the debt.
Yeah, either I send them out to all the registrants, or if you want to shoot me an email, I can give them my business card. But we took registration, so we can send it out to everybody who, if you were registered, you'll get it that way.
Yeah, we're gonna come around in just a second with the fish bowls so that you can put your entries in. Can you just go around and grab them, show them mine, change it? We're just gonna do a quick changeover. We're not going anywhere. If you have questions for Doug, you can continue asking him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So they go on to Jersey to make the catch up near Jordan's Bank, they count the New Jersey catch. I've been boats go out, they catch everything up there and they bring it back, it counts the weed.
Yeah, if it was so the statistic I showed you of about $3.7 billion industry, that number actually includes imports, and that includes imports that are harvested in another state or maybe even another country that are processed or landed here. So, I mean, we have major processors in different parts of the state. So if smooth dogfish or scallops are landed, or scallops are landed whole, or surf clams are landed in another state and processed here, that's included in that number. But if a boat from Barnegat Light went up to the Canadian border to harvest sea scallops, that would get added to Barnegat Light's and New Jersey's landings and catch. So they manage rotational areas. So in the scallop fishery, you'll get a certain number of trips they can take. It's counterintuitive, closed areas or open areas, and they actually told in what region. So a boat, you might get a different, assigned different areas on a different year.
Yeah,
Yep. Okay, cool.
one quick question. We have endangered species on land. Are there endangered fish in the water?
Yeah, some major issues these days with endangered species impacting our fisheries and also now our research. So most at the forefront is the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale. The issues primarily on the, there's two components of the issues. One are potential entanglements with commercial fishing gear, particularly. There's been some entanglements and mortalities in Canada, and entanglements of other whale species in the US. And then the risk of ship strikes by commercial and recreational fishing vessels, as well as commercial shipping and other recreational boaters. There is a plan now in development for a 90% risk reduction on mortalities of North Atlantic right whale, which is impacting the ability of commercial fishermen to fish. And there's a plan proposed to reduce the speeds of all vessels 35 feet and greater to 10 knots, 10 miles an hour or less. And then we have sturgeon and several species of turtles that are endangered. Those issues more so come up on the commercial trawl and sea scallop fisheries. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
How is the proposed wind farm?
Yeah, good question. Gentleman asked about the proposed wind farms. The issues are wide ranging depending upon the life history of the species. And if you want to look from eggs and larvae all the way to adults, there's a potential, some work off of Massachusetts showed that if you build several wind farms, you might actually have some change in the surface currents. So the eggs and larvae might actually be transported to different areas. If you're thinking adults, a lot of our adults, black sea bass, even summer flounder, mahi-mahi, they like structure. So some might be attracted to the structure like artificial reefs. There are concerns about noise, more so during and a little bit after construction. There's some concerns about electromagnetic fields in the cables. Different species have different abilities to receive those electromagnetic fields. So there might be some disruptions to behaviors in different scales from that. So I think it depends on if a species residential, migratory, if they like to hang out on the bottom or the surface, how they might be impacted. So there might be some winners and losers. Are there a few in the webinar?
Yes. Is your opinion of the proposed wind farm off of Atlantic City?
Oh.
In relation to aquaculture and the Barnegat Bay
With the wind farms?
and the relationship of the aquaculture.
Question from the webinar, I believe I just touched on there some of the fisheries impacts of offshore wind development. In terms of aquaculture in the EU, they have pretty extensive aquaculture in their wind farms. Wind farms have been offshore in the EU since about 1994, 1995. So we're learning a lot from what they've done in the EU as the industry is coming here to the Northeast first and other parts of the US. Fishing is restricted in the wind farms in the European Union. Don't expect to have any restrictions from the developers of Coast Guard here in the US. So most of the focus has been on being able to fish and having accessibility within the wind farms. There's been some discussion about aquaculture within the offshore wind farms, but the space conflicts have mostly been about fisheries. And I think that's more likely and the bigger issue right now than the prospective aquaculture off there. We don't have any commercial aquaculture in the Northeast in federal waters, which is beyond 3 miles from the coast. All of our aquaculture is within 3 miles. There's some experiments going on, but we don't even have aquaculture in federal waters yet.
Share the screen.
Well, then if Doug has it over there, he can share that.
He has it on.
I can't project it up there.
That's okay.
It's
Oh,
okay,
yeah,
I got
yeah,
the
yeah.
projection of it.
All right, so,
Changeover?
yep, changeover. So we're gonna do a quick changeover. Doug's gonna hook us up. Yeah, thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
I always learn a lot from Doug. He's got so much knowledge, and is so professional about everything. We're gonna switch over to the other aspect of this, and Rachel's gonna take it from the beginning here. I'm just gonna get her set up. I've done this already. So these are our objectives. Do you want me to do this part for sure? Yeah, so we have 3 objectives with this portion of the evening. We're going to talk about the nutrient and health benefits of seafood, New Jersey seafood, and Rachel's going to take care of that for us. I'm going to talk a little bit about the mercury, because mercury is always a hot topic with that. With the seafood, we always get a lot of questions about mercury. Doug talked a little bit about sustainability, but I'm going to talk about the labeling of sustainable seafood so that you all have an idea of what New Jersey seafood labeling might look like. And then finally, Joanne is going to talk to us about purchasing, preparing, and safe seafood for consumption, and how to keep seafood safe for consumption. A lot of what we've done, for those of you that participated in the seafood consumption study that I did in Cape May County here, a lot of the information is feedback from that. So we're looking at things that you're questioning, and things that you were responding with that. And that I did that survey based on some of the questions we got from this. So it kind of works hand in hand, just to give you a little explanation about all of that. Okay, Rachel, take her away.
Thank you. So thank you for coming. And my portion is really going to go through the nutrition aspect of seafood and really why we should all be incorporating it into our diets. So the main component of seafood and shellfish and finfish is truly that it is very nutrient dense. A lot of us know seafood and fish is good for us, but we're going to go into a little bit more of the detail of that and talk about how it's specifically very high in protein. It's very typically low in fat, and specifically saturated fat. So there's unsaturated fat, polyunsaturated, and monounsaturated fats. And then there's that saturated fat. The saturated fat is that not so healthy fat, that stuff that kind of isn't good for our heart. So it's typically low in saturated fat. And then it's also typically low in sodium and calories. So finfish and shellfish overall typically is low in those categories, which makes it pretty good for us. And then also it's a very good choice to replace some of our other items that we kind of as Americans overall eat, sort of a high, choice in the things that we eat overall weekly, such as beef and poultry. So it might be a good option for us to go with. Oh, I'm going the wrong way here.
No, I do that too.
Go backwards. Okay, so our vitamins and minerals are also things that we're always looking for. We want to make sure that we have things like B12, and seafood overall is a good source for B12. Vitamin D, this is what we call our sunshine vitamin, and we'll get into that a little bit. We have minerals like selenium, zinc, iron, and copper, as well as those omega-3 fatty acids. Those are really good for our brain and our heart health. So we want to go into that a little bit more as well, and I'll touch on that as we go. Yeah. Okay. So overall, seafood is a health food. So, it might be sometimes a little bit of a luxury item. I think we look at it and sometimes we see the cost and we sort of say, oh, it's really expensive. Joanne's gonna really tell you how you can get more bang for your buck on that. But we have to know that if it's cost effective and it's going to help your health, it might be worth every penny. So if you're going to go to the doctor and something's wrong with you, you're going to pay for the medicine that's going to help you, right? So if we can be proactive and prevent some of the things that might not get us to the doctor, why not do it? So if we can maybe replace 1 or 2 meals per week and have the seafood in our diets to help us stay healthy, and it doesn't have to be the expensive items, we can find ways to do that. And it can be a little bit at a time. So we want to try to make sure that we incorporate the health food. If I told you to eat a salad at least once or twice a week, you wouldn't have a problem to do that. So maybe you can have a salad and add some fish to it and get it in your diet that way. So having it do the things that it's listed here. So we want to have it help maintain our mental health and our brain health and help function those things. I said before, it's very high in omega-3 fatty acids, which is really important for our brain and our mental health. We also help maintain our bones. It has a lot of fish has calcium, and that helps maintain our bone health. It really helps improve our immune function. There's a lot of vitamins and minerals that will help improve our immunity, not only right now in the fall and winter months that, you know, we always think about illnesses and things like that, but overall in general throughout our years and our lives, also helping our longevity, helping us live longer, to stay healthy and improve our immunity as well. And then that heart and circulation and our whole body, our whole system staying healthy, and our nervous system. So your overall entire health can benefit from having seafood and fish in your diet, not only a couple times a week, but having a variety of fish and seafood in your diet. So, you know, as I said, we sometimes think of it as an expensive item, but there are ways to not have it be an expensive item. So, you know, in New Jersey, we say, oh, is there anything better than a Jersey tomato or having wonderful Jersey corn in the summer? Well, seafood is also seasonal. So there are certain fish, and, you know, I'm not the expert, maybe, you know, this man over here can tell you more, but there are certain fish that run, you know, the waters certain times of the year, or we have those farms that are doing such wonderful work to make them readily available to us. So if you're going to those, you know, your fishmonger, or finding the areas where you can buy fish more local, you will get the better deal. Therefore, it won't be as expensive. And then you'll be able to have, you know, the better option and find ways to keep it in your freezer, or do what you need to do to get the nutrients in order to keep it in your diet. Okay, so where are we here? So as adults, the recommendation is to have fish about 2 to 3 times per week. And that recommendation is about 4 ounces. 4 ounces of, let's say, a tuna steak is about the size of a deck of cards. We typically say also maybe the size of the palm of your hand, but everybody's palm is slightly different. But it's about the size of a deck of cards because that's a standard size. If you were to have, let's say, flounder or something like that, it's a little bit longer, a little bit thinner, maybe like a checkbook size. So you would know if you were going to a restaurant, you're probably getting a bigger steak than that. So then you know you're having maybe 2 portions or 1.5, depending on how big that actual tuna steak would be. Children ages 2 to 11, the ounces would vary. They started about 1 ounce as a serving, and then they would generally go up until about 11, and then they're up to the 4 ounces as a serving size. So really you're talking, if you're having, you know, a serving of fish, that's a pretty healthy serving, is 4 ounces. You can have that 2 or 3 times a week, or if you're having it, you know, double, let's say, like I just said, at a restaurant, and you're having, that's already now 2 servings, that counts, you know, for that one time, that one meal. So I think it's pretty doable to say we could do this at least 2 times a week and incorporate it in some way with other seafood or other fish into our diets. So here in New Jersey, we have many, many different varieties of fish landed right off the coast. And this is just a simple list that we put together because we were talking with some of our experts about what's readily available. Some of the best things that we can find, of course, the New Jersey sea scallops, black sea bass, not only, as Doug pointed out, you know, how easily you can go on to some websites and find out a lot of the different information. I also hear it's great to go fishing for. My brother just told me he's going a couple weeks from now to go fishing for it. And then I was like, all right, I'll take some when you get it. You know, the tuna, we have both blue and yellowfin tuna. Clams, obviously, we have wonderful clams, and you just heard how they can be farmed. Obviously, it takes a little bit longer than I even knew about. But oysters, wonderful option. A lot of that blue crab out there. Lobsters, some of that flounder or fluke, we know it. And bluefish, I think bluefish is an acquired taste personally, but I hear they're wonderful for fishing as well. And monkfish also. But there's plenty of other fish out there that you can get right off of our coast here and go to many of the fishmongers and get them. I don't even know, sometimes you can get them right off the dock. I know, again, my brother is an avid fisher, so if they have too much and they can't bring them home, they're giving them away. So I'm going to hand it off to Chris.
All right, thanks, Rachel.
Mhm.
So now we're all ready to eat because we want to, yeah, I know. We want to be nice and healthy with our seafood consumption by eating a healthy, lean protein. I'm going to talk a little bit, like I mentioned, about understanding the federal guidelines for special populations within mercury. And again, big topic. People are always asking this. I noticed when I did start looking at the data from the surveys we did about seafood consumption, that people are saying, oh, I wouldn't eat seafood if I was pregnant. So I just want to try to talk a little bit about those myths and maybe debunk them a little bit, and make you understand why it is important to eat seafood, despite the rumors about mercury. Now, these slides were written by our colleague, Dr. Lauren Erickson. She has moved on from our team, from our crew, but we still love her dearly. And she has very generously donated these slides for us to continue to use with the program. So I just want to give a shout out to Lauren for that. So talking about mercury and, like I said, really hot topic, and there's a lot of misperceptions about it. The Dietary Guidelines for American provide guidelines that Rachel mentioned for the seafood intake for the general population. So everybody basically that's healthy and is not within one of these special categories that I'm going to list here. There's additional dietary guideline for these subgroups that we're talking about right now. So just to be clear, the subgroups are the people that need to be cautious about the mercury, and I'll explain how the mercury gets into the system and everything like that. But these subgroups just need to be a little more careful than the rest of us. And these subgroups are people that are pregnant, people who might become pregnant or are planning on becoming pregnant, women of childbearing age. So those years, roughly between 16 and 49 years old, those women might want to be careful with this. Women who are currently breastfeeding, and young children. And, these certain groups are there for a reason. The reason that these are designated aside is because there's a lot of brain development with these groups. So if you're pregnant, you have a fetus growing inside, that neurological development, we want to be careful not to get too much mercury. So there's specific guidelines just for those groups. And mercury, like I said, when it's in utero, but also the thinking and learning and development of young children. So that's the other reason that the young children are in this special group. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how mercury is associated with seafood and how this whole system breaks out, how it gets in there. So how it starts out is elemental mercury comes into play because it comes from things like coal mining and industrial procedures that we do as human beings. So that human activity kind of produces that ethyl mercury. Then what happens is it gets down, obviously runoff, it gets into the oceans, the seas, into our different supplies of the the aquatic system, the aquatic system. And it goes down into the system here. You can see it's kind of hanging out in the sediment there. Well, little critters come and eat the sediment. So those little fish come along and they're going to eat that sediment that has a little bit of mercury in there. And from that, they then get, from a process called bioaccumulation, they get a little bit in there, and then biomagnification makes that the bigger fish eat the bigger fish eat the little fish, so the biomagnification happens. So we're getting, you can see how it's growing. And then when we get up here, this big guy here, he's got a little bit more mercury in him because he's been eating a bunch of little folks there. Now, that being said, yes, there's mercury in there. However, it's not anything that, it's still worth eating that seafood because it's not anything that's going to be harmful. And we know from what Rachel taught us that the omega-3s, the lean protein, the vitamins, the minerals, all those things that we're getting as a positive attribute of the seafood are much more effective and much more important than the little bit of mercury we might get. So we hear a lot about mercury. I remember watching something on TV one time and a person was saying that they had eaten so much seafood that they were like really ill. And it's really not a big chance on that happening unless you're eating a whole bunch. All right, so here's how you can maximize the health benefits of seafood, but minimize that mercury intake. So of course, we have some resources for these vulnerable populations. Remember, they were the folks that were pregnant, planning on becoming pregnant, breastfeeding, or very young children. So the EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the FDA, the USDA, Food and Drug Administration, teamed up and they came up with the joint advice to guide healthy seafood intake by special populations. Again, those special populations. So to do that, what we use is the special chart that we have here, And this chart that they've developed together, the two agencies, shows us the federal guidance for nationwide use. So this is all over the country. They've designed they're designed primarily for the consumer to use when we're purchasing seafood. So when you're looking at this chart, I'm going to go a little bit more in depth in there, but when you're looking at this chart, it's designed for the seafood. So Doug talked a little bit about, landing seafood yourself or going out in the fishing boat. If you're going to do that for local fishery things or local fishing, you're going to want to consult your recreational local guidelines about specific mercury. And the reason that we say that, especially here in New Jersey, those advisories are out there because there could be pollutants in one little place that you're fishing that might not be in another. So you want to make sure you consult them if you're in one of those special groups to make sure that there's no contaminants going on. But also, again, if you're buying seafood, you can consult the chart there. This information includes seafood types where there's sufficient, consistent data regarding mercury content. So remember, Doug mentioned also that we're looking at the scientific information around what we're doing here. And these guidelines are set up around that specific and consistent data regarding these mercury contents. And then also it takes a precautionary approach to these recommendations, right? Because they're not going to recommend things that they don't think are safe for us. So they're going to be really precautionary when they're doing it. And then also it doesn't always include specific species for specific guidance. So you have to look out for that. And there's a variable of different species of the same seafood type. So that might make a little bit of a difference in the charts. And then the target audience should follow seafood type guidance or consult their local advisories, as I said earlier. Women who are pregnant or breastfeeding should definitely consult with their doctors and also your child's pediatrician if you're concerned about the mercury levels of the different seafood. Sorry, wrong way. Oh, wait, no. Am I on the right one? Oh, sorry. Yes, I am. So it was like the same slide over again. I'm like, wait, did I go backwards? Sorry. So anyway, so the chart that I just showed you, and again, I'm going to break it down a little bit further here in a second. That comes down and breaks down for these special groups to best choices, good choices, and then choices to avoid. So as you'll see as we go on a little bit deeper, you'll see how they've broken this down, and I'll talk about the New Jersey the New Jersey seafood specific for these areas. But these recommendations are based on the mercury content according to the likely age, size, and harvest location of the fish. So they're taking that information that's scientifically based and contributing this and help you to make these choices for those special groups. Before I dive into, this is the actual chart, before we break it down into those those three categories, this just gives you an idea, again, how often, how much. For women, 8 to 12 ounces per week is recommended, which is, again, approximately that 4-ounce serving. You can see the hand there, as Rachel mentioned. And then for children, sorry, the screen's a little cut off there. For children, we're going to reduce to the age appropriate amounts that Rachel also suggested, increasing gradually from the age of 1. So let's look at these choices to avoid. These would be those, remember the big fish that had all the mercury in them? They're in these areas. So these are the ones that, if you're in that special group area, you're going to want to try to avoid these because they're likely to have greater concentrations of mercury in them. You can see here the ones in the green box are ones that are New Jersey landed seafood choices, and they can, be enjoyed. All of these can be enjoyed by others according to the dietary guideline recommendations. And these choices to avoid are specifically for those special group areas that I've mentioned. Then we have the good choices, and you can see that we're getting a little bit bigger on the list. So you can see there's more options here. That's the middle-sized fish that you saw in the middle of that first diagram. And these are the ones that are landed in New Jersey so that they are a good resource for us here in New Jersey. And then finally, we have the best choices. So again, a little bit bigger. These are a little bit smaller. And these are the different seafoods that we can take advantage of eating with lower mercury contents for that special group. So if you know anybody in that age group, I know when we found out that our daughter-in-law was expecting, I was sure to grab this out and tell her, you want to make sure to eat the seafood, but at the same time, you want to, you have to eat the seafood for the brain development of the baby, but at the same time, you want to be careful and make sure you're choosing from those lists correctly. And these are some additional resources. We'll send these out. We have your emails from the list there that we collected for the prizes. So we'll send these out as well afterwards. So you have access to these resources so you can check them out yourself. All right, so to move on to the next area, Doug touched a lot about the sustainability of New Jersey fisheries and aquaculture. So I'm not going to overstate what he's already said. We know that sustainable seafood's a continuous journey. Doug's given us some great descriptions on how that's being done here in New Jersey. And, again, it's using evidence-based practices and evolving science to make these recommendations. But I just wanted to tell you a little bit, people have that question about, am I eating something that's sustainable? I mean, that's a reasonable question. We want to take care of the environment. So just so you know, local is sustainable, as Doug already mentioned. These are I'm just giving you a couple examples of the labels here. You can see these Jersey seafood. We have all the little different sea creatures there. We have crabs and fish and scallops and lobster, it looks like, and some squid. So these are, because they're from New Jersey, they're locally caught, they're locally landed, harvested, and raised here in New Jersey. They are all sustainable. And then you can see here, we also have the, we also have the Jersey Fresh symbol on there, and you'll sometimes see when you go into the market, the local seafood market, that they're Jersey Fresh. Now, that being said, sometimes it's not cost effective for a smaller producer of New Jersey seafood to have a label on there. So you might not always see it. So that's fine. That's okay. You can ask the local local fishmonger if it's local and where it's landed. They'll usually know, so you can get information from them. And I strongly encourage you to ask questions like that. Ask them, what the fishes taste like. Is it flaky? Is it Rachel mentioned bluefish, I think, and she's not a fan. So you can ask the fishmonger those questions as well as the, where it's landed, so it's sustainable. Further, domestic seafood is sustainable. New Jersey fisheries and aquacultures are responsibly managed under federal guidelines, as Doug pointed out. So, and he also gave you the Fish Watch information, so I won't go all over that again. So, you can definitely check it out and find out what you're eating that way. This is, again, the Fish Watch. I'm using the same thing Doug did, only I used the summer flounder. So you can find out where it's, how it's rated, the bycatch product, which is, if anything else was caught in with it, and all those different information that you might be interested in to find out whether or not your seafood is sustainable and how it is sustainable. So what if you're at the grocery store and you're like, okay, I was at that talk the other night, and Doug and Chris and Rachel and Joanne were talking about sustainability. How do I find out? So this is just a little bit of information. I'm sure you've all seen, when something's organic, certified organic, there's a USDA label, USDA organic on it. So these are some of the third-party certifications, just like the USDA organic is a third-party certification. And it just gives you an idea, that one example is know the brand or producer, so you know that they're committed to that. The third-party certification is on there with the certified sustainable seafood. And then you have the company touting what it's doing there as well, that they're using a gold standard. So just some information to look at so that you're understanding what the seafood's like. This likely would be on something maybe frozen, in the frozen section. So you're aware you're seeing that. This is just some more examples. I know Doug had some of these in his slides too, but to point them out and really highlight the fact that they're third-party certifications like USDA is, and it gives you those best practices, so where you're getting your seafood from is really working to be sustainable and best practices. So for wild caught fish, they're sustainable fish stocks. So you know, there are enough fish left in the sea. Doug is counting them apparently. This is Lauren. Don't laugh at me. This is what there is enough fish left in the sea. So you can go ahead and eat them. And also there's minimal environmental impact. And then we also have effective management of them. So as Doug pointed out, you know, part of his job is to know these things, and he does. And we have the ability to eat the seafood and, you know, make it part of our diet every day. And these are some labeling too, just to point out, I know people are interested in, you know, the animal welfare and the water quality, disease management, all that type information. So that's all on there too, in these labeling and how they're farmed responsibly. So enjoy, you know, New Jersey seafood. It's sustainable, it's healthy, and it's, you know, it can be cost prohibitive, but we're going to talk a little bit more about those small scale. We're going to talk a little bit more about the cost prohibitiveness, but, you know, like I said, those smaller scale producers might not have these on here, but that doesn't mean it's not from New Jersey. It's not sustainable. Talk to the local distributor of the seafood to know. And now we have Joanne up, and would you like to take questions? You want to wait?
Maybe I'm not.
No, we're gonna keep going, and then we'll take questions at the end. Yeah, that's fine, because we got to do our raffles too.
Okay, lots to do yet, right? Okay, hopefully I'm going in the right direction here.
No, yeah, it's the opposite one. That's
Kind of,
why it's
yeah,
missing
the
all of
opposite.
it.
Okay,
Yeah,
I thought I was
that's
being dyslexic. Okay. So we're going to talk about, so what do you do when you're at the market and you're trying to decide which seafood to purchase? And then what do you do with it once you leave the store? Because it's very important how you go about this to keep it safe and as fresh as possible. I'm going to come out here. It might be a little easier for me to see.
They have to hear you too, Joanne, so you know.
Oh, the when you purchase your seafood, think in the market, how is the seafood displayed? Is it sitting on a bed of ice? It should be sitting on a bed of ice. It should not be sitting in a pool of water with some ice in it. Yeah, I know. Make sure you're looking for, when you're purchasing the food, that it is on ice, because that keeps it as fresh as possible. For finfish, obviously that would not be alive, but for some shellfish, it is still alive when it's sitting on ice, and we want to keep it alive, clams, that type of thing, until we cook it to keep it safe and healthy for us. If you're looking at finfish, you want to look at the eyes, right? You've probably heard that lots of times over the years. Look at the eyes of the fish and make sure they're bright and not real cloudy, and that the gills are bright red. Also, you can look at the skin of the fish, and for the shellfish, obviously you want it to be alive. Make sure there's no cracks or breaks in it, because if a clam or an oyster has a crack in it or a big piece out of the shell, then you should not be eating that. That's not good to begin with. So that's not something you want to look for. If it is, ask them to replace it, you know, as you're standing there at the market. I find that most of the fishmongers in the area will let you see the fish a little bit more closely before they package it, right? Most of the time. That's a great practice. That way you can kind of get a little bit of a closer look at it. They're a little bit careful about that these days, more than they used to be. If you're buying fish that's frozen, don't buy any fish that has been torn or broken apart or has some crushed packaging, because that could be opportunities for contamination to get in. So we want to make sure we don't have that. We want to make sure that there is no frost or ice crystals on the fish, because that could be an indication that the fish was at the proper temperature, but maybe it was frozen and maybe it's sort of thawing or defrosting again. So you want to make sure it's been frozen the whole time, or that it's been fresh the whole time that's been available. If there is a frost line in the case, you know, in the glass case that shows where the fish is, then you want to make sure that the fish you buy is below the frost line. That's where the cooler is the coolest, and you want to make sure your fish is in that area. And I think it's really rare that you would find fish that is placed up really high in a fish case, right? But keep your eyes open for that. If you're getting filleted seafood, make sure that it doesn't have any dark or green edges to it because it's already been cut, and we want to make sure it's still fresh after it's been cut and it's not mushy or dry. If you're buying lobster or crabs, yes, they want to be alive and they want to be moving. They may be moving slowly, that's okay, but they're still alive. So, you know, keep an eye on all of that kind of thing. So how is the best way to be cost effective in what you're going to purchase as a consumer? Because seafood's prices have gone up, as all of, you know, even our meats have gone up so much lately, right? But we want to make sure we get the best bang for our buck. So we did some a little bit of work in putting together some recipes, and we found that you need to buy seafood when it's in season. Okay, now the seafood season for something like flounder, fluke, is a pretty long part of the year. So you'll find that can be fresh most of the time. And same thing pretty much with our clams too. They're available. We have availability charts that I'm sure we have access to, and we can give links to that are on our website that can help you out with that. That's when you get the best price. If you can buy locally from a fresh seafood market or from a market that sells right on the docks, that's probably your best place to go. If you're going to be having a special occasion, then this is the time, maybe it's a holiday or something, to splurge a little bit more on the cost of your seafood. And maybe that's the time when you want to get something you wouldn't normally get. You know, maybe that's the time when you want to try your lobster or something like that. Try white fish. White fin fish is usually very nutritious, has a wonderful texture to it, cooks so quick and easy, and we'll show you some of that coming up. It's also nutritious for you, and it's very often found locally. And once in a while, you want to try something new too. So well, year round, you can find clams, oysters, and squid. You can find that locally. And also available year round, but I don't think people have had as much as something called dogfish. Now, dogfish is pretty prevalent in these waters from what Doug has told us, but we rarely see it in the market. So I'm still looking for a market that can have dogfish so we can try our dogfish taco recipe that we have kind of joked about recently. The greatest availability from April to June, it varies: flounder, monkfish, scallops. I don't know about you, but I'm a big fan of scallops. I think they're very easy to cook. You know, it's pure protein and meat. When you do cook it, there's no excess and no waste. I kind of like that. The greatest availability in the summer through fall, well, this is when you're going to find some of the larger fish, you know, your swordfish, shark, mako, porgy, bluefin tuna. So there's lots available. So here's a little bit of a comparison that actually Chris put this together pound for pound when you're looking at the cost of meat today to the cost of fish, because we always think that fish is way more expensive than meat. But sometimes when you dig a little deeper or dive a little deeper, as Doug would probably say, then you may find that it's a little bit different. So let's take a look at this. New York strip steak between $14 and $23 a pound, but look at fluke or flounder. This is local, right? It's between $9 and $13 a pound. There's a big difference there. So this makes fish a little bit more affordable, some of it anyway. Monkfish is around $14 to $15 a pound, and tuna steaks are about $11, and swordfish maybe about $18 per pound. So you look at that in comparison to meat and you say, gee, it's really not that much more. But the point is this: to use those dollars wisely in terms of feeding yourselves or your family. You know, where are you going to get the best bang for your buck? Where are you going to get the good source of protein, lean protein that really can help to nourish your family on a budget too? So what about storing and cooking seafood? And this is something, again, When we're in the market, we're careful about what we're purchasing. We're being mindful of what we're purchasing and how we're doing it. But then when we get it home, we've kept it cold on ice, hopefully sometimes until we get it into the refrigerator, and then keep it stored appropriately. So when you have fresh seafood, no longer than 2 days in the refrigerator or the freezer. So that's a pretty simple rule of thumb to follow, right? You probably knew that. Just when you're buying this, you're buying it for today, tomorrow, and you're using it today, tomorrow, and then that's the end of it. If you're thawing your frozen seafood, you can thaw it in the refrigerator overnight. And this is really a good practice with just about any kind of meat as well, especially large pieces of meat. Think turkey, like a, Thanksgiving time or whatever. The best way to defrost these foods, these protein foods, is in the refrigerator. It is not sitting on the counter overnight or sitting on the counter for a day and then in the refrigerator and then out on the counter again. It's defrosting in the refrigerator the whole time. That way your temperature is kept appropriate to take care of keeping the fish safe for you. We don't want anyone to get sick from having fish that hasn't been stored properly. If you need to defrost seafood quickly, and sometimes that happens, I'll buy some shrimp, save it for a day or two, and have it in the freezer, and then take it out, and I want to cook it pretty quickly. You can run cold water over it, like in a small colander or a drainer, and that will defrost it very, very quickly. And I know if you've done this, you know that it really only takes a few minutes to defrost it. You can defrost it in the microwave. Be careful, don't leave it in too long, because it does defrost quickly and it cooks even quicker. So you don't want to cook your fish that way in the microwave. Well, you can, but that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to defrost it. When you're cooking your fish, you want to with fin fish, you want to look for 145 degrees Fahrenheit. And you're thinking, okay, how do I know that? Well, you can use a thermopen, a thermometer that you would use for any kind of food like meat or for poultry or fish. Actually, even some of the bread recipes I've been working on lately, we use a thermopen to check the internal temperature to make sure it's there. 145 is the ballpark there. And you'll notice that's lower than the temperature for meats. Meats would be cooked a little bit higher, probably 165 and higher. So the flesh on your fish should be opaque and easily separate when you've cooked it. The scallop should be firm and opaque, and I'll show you some pictures of that. Shrimp and lobster should be pearly looking. The color changes once we cook these from being fresh to cooked. Shrimp in particular, pretty obviously goes from sort of being an opaque color to a pink color. And that's what we're looking for. Your mussels, clams, oysters, and shells open when they are cooked. If the shell does not open, you do not eat it, because that's not cooked properly, or it has been was dead when you started to cook it. So that's when you don't consume. You've heard this rule before, probably. When in doubt, throw it out. So if it didn't open, and you leave it in the steamer just a little bit longer and it's still not opening, it's time to discard it. Do not attempt to force it open or eat it. A few more safety tips on seafood is never leave your seafood out for more than 2 hours. And that's pretty much a rule of thumb with any food, that we would say 2 hours. Never leave seafood out for more than 1 hour if the air temperature is high, over 90 degrees. So it's summer, having a barbecue or picnic, and it's hot. Don't leave it out for more than an hour. It's a very sensitive food that is susceptible to bacteria, and we don't want to increase the risk of bacteria at all. If you're fishing, then you want to store your fillets in an ice-packed cooler in the shade for as long as you're fishing, and or saving it for a picnic or something. So the point is, keep it cold, keep it on ice all the time until you are ready to cook it. So what about some cooking and preparation tips that we have put together? This is actually one of Chris's great recipes for her for Clams Casino. We have the recipe online and you'll have access to that. So a couple of seafood cooking techniques. You'll see that pretty much any way we can cook meat, we can cook seafood. It all cooks kind of the same, you know, obviously tastes very different. You can bake it, broil, steam, grill, pan sear, or smoke it. It depends on your preference and how you like it. Perhaps it depends on the time of the year in terms of grilling or something like that, or maybe even smoking, but all tasty options, right? If you bake it, this is really the best way to cook a whole fish or small fish. If baking, it tends to cook better that way. You can broil using a very high heat. When you're cooking your fish, it adds some flavor and it cooks very quickly. If you steam, it also cooks very quickly. And what you would be doing when you're steaming fish is have it in some type of cooking basket with about 2 inches of water in the bottom of your pan. So the fish, the seafood is not sitting in water, it's sitting above the water and the steam just gently cooks it. If you're grilling it, adds a really great special taste to it. If you're cooking it on a grill or even smoking your fish, obviously that has a very special and significant taste. Pan searing also is great for fish because it cooks very quickly. And that's exactly what pan sear is. It's a high heat in like some type of a saucepan and cook very, very quickly to get that kind of like little bit of a char on it, not too much of a char. Let's talk about New Jersey flounder. This is so abundant in our waters here and it's so easy to cook. And this is the fin fish that you will find in every market, right? You've seen it all the time. It's a great source of protein. It's very lean. It cooks very quickly and easily, and it works in a variety of recipes. So here's one of the recipes that I experimented with as part of this project, looking at a Mediterranean way of cooking New Jersey flounder. Pretty simple, actually. I served it over jasmine rice or whatever your favorite kind of rice would be. And I used vegetable stock instead of water to give the stock a little bit more flavor. It's simple: canned tomatoes, spinach, an onion, sliced up some garlic. Of course, you have to have garlic in there, and some olives if you care for that, and about 1/2 to 1 pound of flounder. Basically putting the, starting with the onion and the garlic in your pan, and adding with a little bit of oil, sauteing that for a few minutes, adding the tomatoes, adding the spinach. And then once that's boiling and you know it's really good and hot with a lid on it, then take the lid off, set your flounder right on the top, put the lid back on, and in literally about 5 to 7 minutes, the flounder is cooked. Perfect dinner, right? This is seriously a less than 30-minute meal. How about New Jersey scallops? These, like I said, are a really great lean source of protein. They're prevalent in our waters here in New Jersey, so you can get fresh ones, and of course you'll look for the ones that are have the Jersey Fresh sign or are day boat scallops. They are real easy to prepare and they work well in lots of recipes. So one of the recipes that we played around with was using farro. Farro is a grain. It's a lot like barley. It's very high in protein. So farro on its own is a wonderful source of protein, but we're going to make it taste really great when we add some grape tomatoes, celery, onions, some red pepper, cucumber. You can add some chives or fresh parsley if you have it, or dried, and that works fine too. And you're going to add your flounder and just give it a little drizzle of olive oil. Once it's been broiled, or however you want to cook it. This would be broiled, would be really great this way. Maybe in an air fryer. I've been kind of experimenting with that. Haven't really tried flounder, but it works really great with salmon. You get a very quick cook on it though. If you're using an air fryer and you're cooking fish, watch it because it cooks so very, very quickly. This is a really great and also a recipe that families enjoy too. Now, here's one of Chris's specialties, her crab cakes. And in this case, she used canned crab meat, which is fine. And you can see it on sale once in a while too. That's the time when you want to buy it. And usually it has a really long shelf life if you keep it in the refrigerator. So be sure to read your labels. She takes her crab meat and separates it up with some flour and an egg, some Worcester sauce, mayonnaise, a little bit of mustard, and fresh parsley. Then you can kind of pat that together into crab cakes. Has anybody here ever made crab cakes? Of course, we live in New Jersey, right? They're very easy to make. Sometimes a little intimidating at the thought, but once you do it, you realize, wow, that wasn't so bad after all, right? And you're just going to cook them in a skillet, or you can cook them under a broiler for really just enough time until they're brown, and they are so delicious, right? There's another one of Chris's specialties, her clams casino. They just look so great there, don't they? She starts with little neck clams, and you clean them under running water. And then once you've scrubbed them well under running water, then you place them in a bowl with cool water and salt in it, and allow those clams, I think it's about an hour, right, Chris, to actually purge themselves. So they will literally clean themselves of sand if you allow them to sit in cool salt water for about an hour. Definitely worth your time, right? Because you don't want to chomp into a piece of sand. She starts with, in her skillet, with her butter, onion, and different pepper, red or green or both peppers, and then tops each of the clams with, actually you've broiled them to open them or steam them. Do you steam them?
It depends.
It depends. Either way, yeah. Get them open and then they're ready. And as soon as they open, that's when they're ready to move on with this next step, which is to layer this wonderful mixture of peppers and onion and butter on top. And she adds some cheese on top of that, and some very thin, and also some very thin strips of bacon, and broil until the bacon is cooked. The clam is already cooked, and now we just need to broil the bacon, and that's only going to take a couple quick minutes. So really pretty simple recipe. Another one of Chris's recipe that happens to be one of my favorites now too. I was intimidated, I will admit, by making clams in white sauce, because I really love it, and I didn't want to mess it up. There's like a group of young kids in I saw them over there. This works really, really well, and it's super simple. You would clean the clams same way, scrub them under running water, allow them to sit in salt water for a little while. And then in the meantime, you can start sauteing your onion and your garlic that are minced up in your olive oil, and then add some flour. That's just going to help thicken it. And when the clams are, you're ready to put the clams in, you just put them into the sauce. They will open up on their own. And if they don't open, you're going to throw it out, right? If a clam does not open, don't eat it. And serve this, which is great, with Parmesan cheese over hot pasta. Oh boy, no wonder that's so popular in restaurants, right? It's a good one. Another really, really simple recipe that Chris came up with about using tuna steaks, which we can often see in our markets here, and just seasoning them very, very simply with garlic powder, salt, and pepper. We have video on all these recipes online, by the way, so you can actually go back and look at it step by step. And then she sears it in the pan with some avocado oil on a pretty high heat. And that's what searing is. It's a high heat for a short time, seared on both sides. And then she actually, I think this is your next picture, right? No.
That's it, yeah.
That's not it. I'm sorry. Then she sometimes puts sesame seeds on the top, or, pats it in sesame seeds on both sides. That is super yummy. So seafood is pretty easy to cook. You have to pay attention to it because you don't want to overcook it. I'm assuming that at some point in your life, you had a piece of seafood of some kind that was a little bit tough, rubbery, or you couldn't cut it. Oh yeah, I see the head shaking. That means it was overcooked for the most part. So it's very time sensitive. You need to be very attentive to whenever and however you are cooking your seafood. Do not overcook it. Again, fin fish, 145 degrees. Your whole fish, the rule of thumb is to cook it for about 10 minutes for every inch of thickness. So, okay, you can do a little math, figure out how thick your fish is, 10 minutes per inch, which is not really very much time. You can test your fish for doneness by taking a fork and then trying to pull it apart a little bit. It should easily just flake apart. That's the test of doneness. Easily flakes apart, you're good to go, and it's ready to serve. Shrimp, lobster, and scallops, of course, they would turn color and they would become a little bit more firm. Shrimp, lobster, and scallops, oops, I already said that. Clams, oysters, and mussels would, the shells would open. And then we know that's ready. So as I said, we have these recipes in hard copy, in PDF version on the top website, and we have videos of step-by-step how to make them that you should have access to on the bottom website. Here's some references that we used in creating these programs. Yes, we are promoting eating local New Jersey products of all kinds, but especially local fish, because you saw from Doug's presentation, we have an abundance of fish here in our waters and we should enjoy that, right? I'm going to turn it back over to Chris to do the wrap up.
This is our team who you've met, most of us there. And then this is our contact. This is our emails. I put everybody's email, even Doug's on that at the end there. Before we get going with some questions, I just wanted to do a little bit of drawing. There, what we're gonna get. We also have a goodie bag for everyone on your way out. Jack McKayton. Jack, you here? Oh, you're trying to run away. See that? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. There you go. Have a good part. I like seafood. We're gonna eat more seafood, right? All right. Let's see. Do you want to grab one out?
Yeah, we honored.
Go pick your own. Okay, no.
Wish I could read.
Well, you're not getting one. My husband. It's Bob Edwards. There you go. All right, Bob. There you go. You feeling lucky, buddy? Take one out of there. Ted Diasalo. Sorry about that. There you go. You're welcome. And you want to pick one? Charles Griffin. Charles. There you go. You get it, but next one back. That's what it's ready. All right, we have a couple more. We have. Let you pick a couple more out of here. Betsy. You here? There she is. Okay. All right, these are some seafood cookbooks for you. In the bags there, we have some other goodies with recipes and stuff in there too. Christina Bell. One more? Two more? Yeah, we got it. Thank you guys for coming. You made that. Ellie, you got it. Ellie? All right, I'm gonna pull the last one. Let's see. There's only an email. Sale. Oh, that's me. Okay, there you go. You know, it's my name. There you go. Well, thank you all for coming. Let's answer some questions now. What do we have? Anybody have any questions for us? Sure. Uh-huh.
Is there any problem with pescatarian diet being
No, it shouldn't be. You know, again, like if you maybe with the pescatarian diet, you want to focus a little bit more on those, you know, not eating all of the ones to avoid in the same week, you know what I mean? But the basic premise of eating any type of healthy diet is a variety. So when we recommend like, you know, fruits and vegetables, we say eat a variety. When we recommend seafood, we say eat a variety. So even being a pescatarian, it's fine to be able to, you know, mix it up and enjoy different types of seafood. And then that way, you know, it shouldn't be an issue. I don't know about you ladies. Have you ever met anyone that ate too much seafood and got mercury poison?
I know.
No, never,
I
right.
think there's more fear about it, but once you're
Yes.
educated, know something about it, you realize that, you know. you
Yeah.
have control of that.
Yeah, and the benefits far outweigh. Yeah,
And
for
I
sure.
just absolutely love that graphic that
Lauren did, I
created,
know.
the little fish and the bigger fish.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the thing to remember, right? Hopefully.
yeah. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah.
2 days in the freezer, is that accurate?
So it's, if you don't eat it after 2 days, put it in the freezer.
Gotcha. Oh,
There you go. Okay, yep. Yeah, you can, yeah, it's longer. And label it when you put it in the freezer.
And make sure it's in, you know, a sealed bag, like
Yeah.
I love those Ziploc bags or something.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, you didn't mention raw clams or raw oysters. What's your take on that?
So,
For food safety guidelines, we tell you to cook your fish to doneness. That is our food safety recommendation.
that's all we're gonna say about that. We're well aware, and we've had, it's funny because, you know, we had discussion on this in one of our, you know, when we were all together, the big crew of us, because it was mentioned, you know, I mean, obviously that's the way, a lot of people don't enjoy them that way, but we've tried some grilling of oysters and clams and things like that, somewhat to Joanne's dismay a little bit, but
Very popular.
yeah, right. So, you know, but it's not, the food safety is not there. There's the chance that there could be a, you know, a foodborne illness. So you're aware.
Check the USDA guidelines. We all work for the USDA, so.
Yeah, USDA guidelines. Yeah. Anybody else have a question in the audience? How about from the,
One came up earlier. I showed it to you. Joe was asking, did it say something about copper minerals and seafood on one of your earlier slides?
So all those, the copper, selenium, zinc, and what was the other one?
copper, selenium, zinc?
There's a fourth, and why it's escaped my mind. All of those minerals are really important for our immune, our brain, and that's why we mention them in the slides, that if they're not necessarily minerals that we would be like, hey, let me go grab my copper supplement, you know, but they are minerals that are found in fish, and they're important for our immune and our brain and our nervous systems, but they are elements that we need in order for our systems to function properly, but we don't often think about them as something that we would want, you know, to go find, but they're there and they are really helpful and they have good benefits for us. So I hope you can hear us.
Yeah. Yeah. So Rachel's answer for those that were on the call, yes, there is copper, selenium, there's other minerals in there. They're not necessarily something that we're going to go out seeking in a supplement type thing, but they're natural things that occur in the foods that we eat and our body help our bodies function properly. Any other questions, Doug?
One general one. Everybody who registered, are we going to send them our slides?
So with our slides, we always have this conversation come up, and because the information can be interpreted with, especially the nutrition, we do not share slides. We'll share the resources and the information so that they have accessibility to that. But yeah, that's
At least the links.
and the links. Yeah, the links will be in there. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and then you'll have the recording as well. And we'll send that out to all of you as well. And I think it's important to point out that we have on the one slide, those recipes. Joanne has been great about getting those recipes up on this website, and you can watch the videos of them. So, you know, if you wanted to cook one of those dinners, you could start it on your phone and pause it so you can go through and make it on your own at home. So there's some great recipes there. We've been trying to beef that up a little bit, or I guess that's not a good fish term, is it? I'm trying to build that up a little bit, and we continue to add to them so you can check back in from time to time.
And all the videos are like 3 minutes or less.
Yeah, they're short videos, so they're
Not like
quickies.
a feature-length film or anything.
Yeah. Yep.
I would really just encourage, I don't know, I mean, you're here because you, I'm gonna say are interested in seafood. But I would really just encourage you, if you're not a huge seafood, you know, fan, to try to experiment, because I really grew up not loving seafood, but I'm majored in nutrition, so learned that seafood's really good for me and I should like it. So I kind of forced myself to learn and like it. And as I experimented with different recipes, I then learned how to like it with different recipes. So certain things might not be the best way that you might like it, but if you try different recipes and different ways to prepare different types of seafood, like Chris was saying, like I was saying, if you try the variety of different ways to prepare it and different types, so not always the same fish, you might not like one fish versus the other. But if you try different ways, that's how you can incorporate it into your diet more often.
Right, anything else? Well, thank you all for coming. We